This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Good. I got about a foot of snow over the weekend. The rest of the country seems to be getting warmer, but not in South Dakota.
That is too much snow.
We're fighting for the winter.
It's raining here in the Asheville, North Carolina area, and maybe turns to snow a little bit later today. And I've got to drive out to Charlotte right after we record this. So I have the feeling it's been one of those days where I think everybody's experienced this, where you have to make a trip and you're traveling with the weather. So
Yeah.
I think I'll be like with this little, storm front that's kind of moving along to the east.
Yeah, it's kind of scary when you see like tornado. I don't know. Denise is a real tornado person. Like she knows where all the tornadoes are popping up, and she has an app for it and everything, and gets me worried, gets me feeling anxious.
I think anyone who's grown up in the Midwest, myself included, had tornadoes throughout their lives. So definitely living in the Chicago area, we would have those. We had tornadoes actually come through like Kankakee area a few weeks ago, and I have some family members down there that had some damage to their house and cars and stuff like that. But fortunately, everybody was okay. But tornadoes are no joke.
Yeah. She might not enjoy going to the Sphere for the Wizard of Oz. Like that's the game plan, but might be too intense for her.
Yeah, you said that like it blows wind around or something. It's like a sensory experience. It's not just the audio and the visual, huh?
Yeah, it sounds like there's like raindrops and leaves that fly around as well. So this is like third hand information. I might be totally like, totally blowing it up into something it's not. So,
Well, if you find it on
now
the
it's
internet,
official.
it has to be true.
Well, that's it. That's it. And now I'm making it something that's part of the history of the internet.
Yep. And this will get transcribed and it'll end up in, podcast players and therefore become fact and on the record. So no disputing the knowledge that's being shared here, whether it's right or wrong.
That's right. Do we have a Wikipedia page yet?
I have no idea. I haven't even
We
looked.
should have one.
It hasn't even occurred to me why we would have a Wikipedia page.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know if you're supposed to write one about yourself or if that's something that has to be bestowed on you like a nickname.
I think it would be weird to write your own Wikipedia page. That just seems kind of self-promotional. I'm not interested in that. If somebody wants to write one, fine, but I'm not about that.
Yeah, I'm not about that life either.
You know what life I am about in clever segues is conferences. We've got a few different ones coming up. We've got EIC, European Identity and Cloud Conference, coming up in Berlin in a couple months. So you and I are headed out to Berlin in May for that. That'll be fun. I know we haven't really kind of figured out what we're going to do while we're out there, but I assume we'll be recording some podcasts, right?
We are recording some podcasts, yeah. So I don't want to mention the guest names yet, but we're going to record 2 to 3 podcasts while we're there. Plus, we'll do the Identibeer episodes. It's always fun just to spend time with our, people who are aware of the podcast out there, or people maybe who aren't, and we're meeting them for the first time, and they're just becoming aware of the podcast and the community that we're trying to build around it. I mean, it's really this identity practitioner community. So ID Pro, our podcast, there's other things that kind of the entire community rallies behind. And I'm just, glad to be part of that.
Yeah, it's a warm, welcoming community. Happy to be a part of it. And the water is warm, so come on in. You can
Come on in.
you can be as demonstrative or just a wallflower. Either way, all are accepted.
That's right. Yeah, one of the things that's great about recording a couple extra episodes at the conferences in the summer is that it's the summer, and usually we, want to take some time off and take a break from all the recording. So if we can, do a power couple of hours and record a few podcasts, that always helps.
Yeah, I remember the old days where it would be you and I trying to like record episodes and then kind of get them out the next day, and that was just like that's not sustainable. So
yeah, that's not really
I
sustainable.
actually want to go to the conference and enjoy it rather than be like in a hotel room editing, 20 hours a day.
Yeah, no, that was kind of crazy. But I think the one reason I bring up conferences in the beginning of all the episodes is that we have discount codes. If you go to our website, idacpodcast.com, All the discount codes are listed there. You can just copy and paste them in the registration form. I think we even link right to the registration form for the conferences that give us the discount codes. And by the way, if you're listening and you run a conference or are connected to folks who run a conference and you want to have your discount code listed, you don't need to be a sponsor of the podcast. If you're doing something for the community, like giving a discount, we are more than happy to share that out using the platform.
Yeah, for sure. Have them all listed there on the website. Scroll down, try to keep everything updated as best as I can. I know you and I are looking to get to RSA maybe, I don't think we're going this year, but next year. Um, so maybe if somebody has any pull with the RSA folks, let
Yeah.
us know, put us in touch. I'd be happy to figure out how to get the podcast out there as well.
Yeah, or if the RSA folks are listening, we'd like to come and bring the podcast experience to RSA. They could use the growth in their conference.
Yeah, exactly. They're a small struggling conference that needs a lot of help. So we're happy to lend the power of our platform for that.
Yeah, exactly. What else do we have coming up?
Well, after EIC, we've got Identiverse in June. So looking forward to that. So of course, discount codes for that one as well. Check our website, but that'll be in June in Vegas. You and I will have another game show type session. I don't think we've locked it down completely as far as time and date. Probably the opening night, but don't hold us to that. That is subject to change. And then, of course, we'll be probably recording some episodes there. I think we'll have a booth like we did last year, kind of out on the show floor that we'll be recording some live episodes from, and hopefully people will wander by and say hello.
Yeah. Yeah, we love the conference, and you and I enjoy Vegas, and I know not everyone shares that opinion, but try to make the most of it. There's a lot of experiences out there. I mentioned the Sphere. Everybody can find something to do there.
Yeah, I enjoy it. There are ways to find enjoyment no matter where you are, and I try to look for that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right, so for this episode, we kind of decided to take a step back for this first quarter, which shockingly is almost gone. I think by the time people listen to this, I think next week, it'll be basically over. And there were a few different reports in the IAM industry that were kind of put out. So decided to just take this episode at a high level, kind of talk through what the reports were. We'll have links in our show notes for all of these reports. So hopefully as many direct links as I can find to go there so that hopefully, it'll be less spammy if I can avoid it. But I'm sure for, some of these, you'll have to exchange a email for the report itself to see the actual data. But there were 6 or 7, I believe, that kind of put together on this list. And so what I'm going to do is kind of talk about the report, say, here's what it is. Here's some of the high level stuff maybe on it. Jim's going to take his hot takes, and then we'll kind of move to the next one. And hopefully we can get through everything we've got on the list and the time we've kind of set aside for this. So, Jim, are you ready?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm always ready. Let's start with the first one. The Checkpoint Cybersecurity Report 2026. This one came out in January 28th of this year. Basically, the kind of high levels on this were, of course, risky AI prompts increased quite a bit. Shocking that our first report is going to talk about AI right away. And of course, identity weaknesses, misconfigurations, unmanaged assets. I'm reading through my notes here. Were always, a problem there throughout the year. But what are your hot takes? What did you take out of this report?
Few things. So, probably number one was around this AI piece and it being not just more attacks, because there is that, right? There's more attacks happening, but the speed of the attacks, they're all happening at programming speed. So it talks a little bit about how long the attacks took, something in the neighborhood of on average, the 1 hour attack where you go from initial intrusion all the way through data exfiltration or data encryption, taking an hour to 2 hours. That's happening so fast that there's not time to shift into human defenses, right? So that's kind of hot take number one. I think hot take number two is around, we're seeing it and we're talking about it, which is that MFA by itself, and not just good MFA versus bad MFA, but just counting on the initial authentication alone is not enough, right? And you hear Ian Glazer talk about this continuous identity, continuous authentication, and that's really what this is speaking to. And by the way, all the reports we're going to talk about today, I don't think anything came out where it's like, oh my gosh, like I haven't thought of that at all. Like these are all trends that are major things that are happening within the industry. And if you walk the halls of the vendor hall in any like of the major identity conferences, it's full of solutions that talk about these problems. So the speed of AI attacks, the need for continuous identity and not just banking on MFA. And then kind of the third one was around machine identities and them being the next big identity crisis. So you have all these machine identities. So it's accounts that you're using to connect your SSO site to your IDP to your SaaS applications. It's API keys. It's all the things that if you're not doing a good job of managing those are the targets. Those are the way that folks get entrance. And by the way, like the API keys are I'm sorry, the admin accounts for your SaaS applications, like those are the crown jewels now.
Yeah, there's so much going on here. I think there were a couple of things that kind of struck out to me was the usage of MCP servers, which is supposed to be the savior of how things interact with each other. I think they found roughly like 40% were not configured securely. That's a lot, especially when you're considering that those MCP servers probably branch out into other MCP servers. So it can be a compounding problem as you go through it. The other thing that I thought was interesting was the delivery mechanism for a lot of the malicious files was predominantly email. I think it was something like over 80% of the path for the emails coming in, or over 80% of the malicious delivery of intent came in through email. So that was interesting to me that people are still clicking on things in emails and still downloading and still running things that they don't recognize. But hey, that's why we have jobs.
Yeah, right.
Anything else jump out of you on this report?
No, we have like 7 reports we want to get through, right? I think there's some themes that are going to repeat as we go. So we probably ought to go through them somewhat quickly and then talk about like the big takeaways afterwards.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and predict AI. So, in a shock to no one,
Yeah.
probably at this point. All right, the next report was Recorded Future 2026 State of Security Report. This one came out in February. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, this is to your point. So first off, the backdrop to all this is the idea of not just cybercrime for the fact of stealing monetary type assets, right? It's also the geopolitical context and hacktivists and kind of this Venn diagram, if you will, of the three of those and the intersecting circles. And so that was the background of it. But I think what kind of the cybersecurity takeaways were, there was a lot about AI to kind of like get people's, to basically make the phishing process and the social engineering process more successful. And then about the cyber criminals using that to get onto networks, kind of live off the land or not set off alarm flags. So kind of the learning coming away from this is that the threat actors get onto your network and then try to stay there unnoticed while they slowly discover your network, right? They're not doing things that will like, hey, we're going to hit the HR database right away, or we're going to start scanning the network right away, or doing things that would immediately set off alarm bells. We've known about this. I mean, I think I remember it was maybe the IBM threat vectors report, which was a big one in our industry, saying something like the average from the time of the initial intrusion to the time of detection is something like 170 days on average, which on average means like there are a lot that are a lot longer than that. So keep all that in mind. And I think it tells you that, as the identity practitioners, we need better tools to discover if we've already been breached, if we already have somebody on our network who's just basically, trying to lay low.
Yeah, this one seemed like it had a lot more to do with like geopolitics as well as artificial identities. So deepfakes identities up like 10 times compared to 2024. Synthetic identity fraud was up like 300%, something like that. Lots of new ransomware variants, which was like a third increase over the year before that. They specifically called out nation states like China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, basically being covert and kind of lying in wait to your point, sitting there with access but not really doing anything with it yet. And most of these most of these issues were coming through identity again, credentials rather than like a technical exploit of some sort. So,
And that's crazy
credentials.
when you think about like China or Russia, because then you think like, oh, they're using some kind of 0-day exploit, right? These are advanced hackers. And while those things do happen, the preferred methodology is like just find somebody's credentials and log in. And that's like, you hear every executive who knows a little bit about cybersecurity nowadays saying hackers don't break in, they log in. It's like, yes, that's obvious, but sometimes the obvious stuff needs to continue to be restated because it's now core truth of what we do.
Yeah, identity at the center, baby. For good or for bad.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get to the next one. Sophos Active Adversary Report 2026, another one that came out in February, so just within the last month. Some of the highlights on this one: two-thirds of the incidents were identity related as a root cause. MFA was missing in almost, I think, 60% of the attacks, so that's bad. Brute force getting just as popular as exploitation as an initial access method. So, again, identity at the center of another report. What are your thoughts on the Sophos report?
I think you're right on. Is that it's another one where identity is or AI is a recurring theme. What I thought made this report different was a little bit of a focus on identity infrastructure as kind of where folks or where the attackers were focusing their attack paths on. It's like the identity infrastructure. So identity infrastructure needs to be protected. That's the ITDR. It's kind of the ISPM, like really understanding where you have potential breaches to make it harder to attack your identity infrastructure. Like identify the gaps, identify potentially where you have weak passwords or where you have like default configurations that just make it easier uh, for the attackers to gain entry into your system. Those are some
Yeah,
of the things that jumped out at me about this one.
yeah. I think there was another thing was talking about the median attacker dwell time. So how long the attacker is in the environment before you find out. And they said it was down to 3 days, which is great. Hey, progress is progress, but 3 whole days in an environment, that's still far too long. And so, that's something to take a look at. And I think this is, I'm not sure, I have to look through my notes on the other reports, but this one also mentioned AI, but not what I expected in that there was no evidence of major AI driven transformation in how like the attacker behavior was found, which I find interesting because pretty much every other report seems to indicate AI is accelerating things, and this one did not come to that conclusion.
Yeah. I think that the whole dwell time thing also is, if you're like a hacktivist, right? Your goal might be to time an exploit or, your action around something that your target did. So, for example, if it was a nonprofit organization or political action committee that, you were against or your hacking organization was against, you might wait until they make some big announcement or something happens and then try to defame their website or hold them for ransom or things like that. If your motivation is strictly profit, you might want to get in and conduct that exploit as quickly as possible. Right. If you're just saying, I want to encrypt this database and or steal these files, like once you find them, why wait? Why sit and wait?
Yeah. Well, I think these are basically two different types of motives, right? One is to make money, and that is the one where just spray and pray, get as many things as you can out there in the wild and see what hits. And if you get 1% back, that's a great success rate, for some of these folks because somebody's going to pay. And then the other one is a target attack, which is much more difficult to defend against. If someone is actively targeting your organization, that is when you're really in trouble, and you've really got to get all hands on deck and try to batten down as many holes as possible. So, that's a whole different beast that frankly I don't want to be a part of that right now. I want to keep it positive.
Yeah, right. Definitely.
All right. The next report came from Palo Alto Networks Unit 42, Global Incident Response Report. This one also in February. Some of the highlights in this one, again, identity weaknesses in nearly 90% of the investigations, which is more than the 80% that I typically hear. So I wonder where they came with the 90%, if they're just identifying more or associating more of those investigations with an identity issue. Let's see. 65% of initial access was identity driven. And I liked the stat. The fastest attacks in 2025 reached data exfiltration in just 72 minutes, down from 285 minutes. So almost a fourfold increase in the speed with which the attacker was able to abscond with data.
Yeah. Well, and, out of transparency, I mixed up one of my points there with the last report. It was actually this report that pointed to the identity infrastructure as the main takeaway. And, the biggest vulnerability in most organizations is now their identity infrastructure. So really understanding where your gaps are relative to your identity infrastructure and understanding hey, will your MFA, for example, if you're depending on MFA as your main control, which a lot of organizations are for entry onto your network or access to your cloud applications, are you susceptible to a man-in-the-middle attack? And if you're using a weaker form of MFA, something that's phishable, then the answer is yes.
All right, next report. This one just came out within the last week or so from IBM, the X-Force Threat Intelligence Index 2026. Couple highlights from this one from what I saw. Public-facing applications were the most common initial access vector, 44% increase from the prior year. More extortion groups, not surprised there at all. And this is the one that kind of first called out the major supply chain and third-party breaches quadrupled over 5 years. So, and attackers are increasingly going after identity integrations, cloud interfaces, all the different back-end processors that you might have with an organization, and definitely something to look at. Shout out to the couple of sessions that I actually moderated for the cybersecurity summits in Chicago and Philadelphia, and happening in other cities around the U.S. This year. My session was moderating a discussion on supply chain risk, and so this one's kind of near and dear to something that I just recently had interactions with.
Yeah, definitely supply chain risk, but because if you can take over major infrastructure pieces that have access to the entire network or to the entire environment, and that's why identity is such an ideal attack point. I think that the point that you brought up earlier about the cybercrime organizations being more fragmented, you said it was more, but the takeaway that I had reading the report was that it was just smaller groups. Maybe it was people splitting off from larger groups, but it's also harder for.
Are you telling me there's no honor among thieves?
No honor among thieves, right? Exactly. The idea being that these groups operate in smaller units, so there's not just big phishing groups or big ransomware groups out there like there have been in the past. They're operating with smaller. And I saw one part of, I think it was this report referred to it as like a gig economy. So there's people with computer skills and obviously like some ethical concerns who look at this as a way to just supplement their income. They're doing it as like a part-time job. And when you think about what happened with the scatter spider, I think also about this fragmentation in terms of specialization. So if your specialty is getting, social engineering, you focus on social engineering, getting the credentials, then selling the credentials, and another specialist may work in running the ransomware software, like getting into a network. Now that they basically can just log right in, somebody else gave them the login or they purchase the login and get into the network and execute the rest of the exploit. I think when you think about it from that perspective, it's like it's really hard. It seems like it would be really hard to keep up, but ultimately, where everything starts is that credential. So when you think about social engineering, phishing, and I think a lot of organizations get this, right? We harp on this point a lot on the podcast, and you're starting to, you know, to see it, like even in the organization that we work for. Actually, I shouldn't say you're starting to see it. We've been seeing it for a while, where you get like these phishing emails, right? And you're supposed to report them, or at very least not like click on them, right? So with even people who are not super technical historically are getting used to spotting spam and saying, "I'm not going to click on this link because I think it's not a real link."
People are getting smarter, but so are the attackers. We kind of point back to the poorly written email spam, from our, princes that were trying to get money into the into the US that are now very well crafted. I want to go back to a point you made around the number of, I guess, threat actors and these groups kind of splintering into smaller groups. I think this is AI at work here, or at least that's one of the reasons. Because just as everyone is getting more efficient with AI, so are attackers. You don't need as many people before, because if you have a bunch of AI bots running around, you can outsource that to your own AI agents that are doing bad things. So it wouldn't surprise me to read between the details there, or between the lines in the report, and say, hey, not only is obviously the good guys getting more efficient, so are the bad guys. And some of these groups that, used to be, large organizations and that gig economy are becoming a little more self-sufficient, and you just don't need as many people. And so, yeah, they go and splinter off and say, okay, we're going to do our own thing and make some money off of it.
Yeah. And I would say that's probably a trend that's going to continue. It's not going to reverse itself anytime soon.
Yeah, one man shop with a whole bunch of AI agents, open claws, and all kinds of different things that are, doing bad things. Let's get to the next report here, the Darktrace Annual Threat Report 2026. This one also just came out in the last week. Let's see, highlights. 70% of incidents in the Americas began with stolen or misused accounts. Registered software vulnerabilities rose 20%, even though attackers shifted towards credential abuse, of course. And then Azure as the most targeted cloud provider, accounting for 43.5% of malware samples, which I find surprising. I would have thought AWS would be one, but at least according to Darktrace, Azure was the top spot.
Yeah. And look, the more we go through this list, the more we're going to struggle to find new things to talk about. I think, a lot of the themes about identity becoming the most important attack vector, then transitioning to ransomware once you're in the door, trying to get in the door and remain undetected, and attacks happening at AI speed. So those are kind of some of the common themes up to this point. I think when I read this report, my takeaway was they're really pushing for folks to take that detection piece seriously, like almost to the extent that, look, we know we can get to 98% or 99% of stopping people from giving up their credentials or losing their credentials through social engineering or phishing, but we'll never get to 100%. So in other words, people are going to get creds and get in. The key is going to be how to detect them. So in this report, they talk about investing in tools to detect them. I think that one of the previous tools talked about using continuous authentication, continuous identity. And I didn't see it anywhere in these reports, but kind of shifting more toward a zero trust, not just a zero trust environment, but zero standing privileges kind of approach. Those things are going to be key to preventing kind of these major breaches.
Yeah. I mean, I think zero trust is sort of like foregone conclusion that, yeah, everybody kind of should be doing that. The zero standing privilege one I struggle with. It's a great idea, but I think it's really tough to do in real life. I don't think most organizations are ready to dynamically add and remove permissions to their humans and their non-humans are probably easier because that's a little more programmatic, but you know, there's very few organizations I'll say that have reached the maturity where they are actually capable of doing zero standing privileges.
Yeah. I think today that's probably true because humans operate at human speed. We can only get so much done. Eventually, AI powered tools should be able to enable us to do that at scale.
Yeah, an AI that says you can't do that. Sorry. I can't.
One thing that just occurred to me was like one other common theme that like all these reports started with is that the number of breaches has grown tremendously fast, and that they all kind of point back or nod back to AI as being the reason. Like the number of attempts to attack are like off the charts, and then the number that succeed are going to be some percentage of that, regardless of how many they try. So, AI is enabling the attackers to attack at a much greater rate than before.
Yep. More attempts equals more breaches. You know, even if you block 95% or 99%, it's still a 1% game. 1% of 100 is 1% of bigger numbers grows, right? So it's just gonna be more breaches. Just
That
it's
brings
straight
you
up
back to
numbers.
thinking about those Nigerian prince emails, because you get them and you're like, who the heck would ever send these people money? And then you think like, well, they send 1,000,000 of them.
Mhm.
If two people send them money, that's an incredibly small percentage, right?
Yeah, but
But
it
if two
works.
people send the money, it costs them nothing to send it to 1,000,000 versus, to 500 people.
Yeah. What I
And
find
now
interesting.
with AI, it's even easier.
With that whole sending money and gift card scams and things like that, I'm seeing more headlines around banks being on the front line of those and trying to protect their customers, and obviously ultimately themselves from losing that money from a fraud claim. Which I find interesting that banks are now, on the front side of protecting customers before the issues happen.
Have you ever seen, I can't remember her name, but she's, I think, with National Geographic. And
Then
she
no,
has
I
like
have not. I have no idea what you're talking
well,
about.
they're on YouTube, but she does these investigations of like different types of fraud people do around the world. And one of them that she did a episode on was the call centers that they have all over the world, where people just basically, once they get somebody hooked, think about how many times like, you get like these fake phone calls, or if you were to click on one of these emails, eventually it might turn into a phone call. There's just people who are operating these frauds, and some of them is like hundreds of people in a location doing that. Now, I don't know with what we talked about earlier if that is breaking up and like those kind of groups don't exist as much anymore, but the local authorities, for the most part, look the other way.
Yeah, I think it depends on where you're at, but you're totally right. These are operations. They are companies that their entire job is to scam people out of money.
Yeah.
I'll give a shout out to I first discovered him on Twitch, but he's also on YouTube. Kit Boga, Kitboga, I think it is, and he messes with scammers all the time and kind of calls in with like crazy voices and tries to take down their systems and things like that, and just kind of waste their time, which is kind of the best thing you can do if you're not super technical and want to try to hack them, is waste their time so they're not actually inflicting harm on others. But that's an interesting channel if you ever want to have some fun with scammers or see what other people have fun with it. Um, this Darktrace report had a couple other things that kind of jumped out to me, and one was QR code phishing was up on this one. So I think everyone's familiar with QR codes appearing on screens, and I think we use one sometimes on, stuff that we do at conferences or maybe, but that is also becoming an attack vector that we have to look out for. And then to your point around, phishing and sort of goods that are too good to be true, Black Friday was up big time in 2025. It was like over 6 times as many in the previous year. So, lots of avenues to be exploited, both personally and professionally.
So I'm glad you talked for a minute there to give me a chance to Google. This National Geographic show is called Trafficked, and it's with Mariana Van Zeller. Anyway, hit up YouTube. They're all on YouTube, and they're really, really good.
All right. Traffic is what you call it?
Trafficked.
National Geographic?
Yeah. National Geographic. So the first one that came up was crypto scams. But there's others on like drug trafficking and all kinds of like bad stuff that happens in the world. There were a lot of them that are very specific to the cybersecurity space.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's the meme. Trafficking. So hot right now. All right.
Everybody wants to be in trafficking.
Right. All right. The last report on our list here is from our friends at Hypr, the 2026 State of Passwordless Identity Assurance Report. This one just came out within the last week. Couple highlights from this time. Again, generative AI and agentic AI have displaced stolen credentials as the primary identity security concern. So this report is claiming that AI has basically taken over stolen credentials. 87% of organizations, which I find this stat to be kind of staggering, encountered a audio or video deepfake in an identity-based attack. So this thing that we've been talking about for a while, 87%, I think they had like 900 people or 900 organizations that were part of their sample size. 87%.
Yeah, that number sounds high. It does sound high, but I mean, even if it was 8%, I'd still be like, wow, we're really moving. So if it's a high percentage like that, like over the majority,
I mean, that's just
that
way over the
changes
majority.
the game.
That's almost everybody has to deal with some sort of deepfake.
Yeah.
Now that could be something with, Hypr's customer base, being on the fraud side of things. Makes sense, right? That sort of thing. But again, it's a real thing happening in the real world.
So here's some real world advice that I got from another podcast. So I listen to other podcasts. Shout out to the
crazy.
Another AI. We're not an AI podcast, not yet officially anyway. So the Moonshots podcast, and this thing is like way longer than most people have to dedicate to podcasts, but they recommend having a secret code word within your family or people who you might get deepfaked by. So your spouse, your kids, things like that. Your parents, if essentially you think they would be calling you and asking you for money. The idea is then you ask them for what the code word is. And if your code word is something like bananas or something like that, that wouldn't be guessed. Mine's not bananas, by the way, so don't even try it. But if you have a code word like that. So it's kind of like having I think we all learned this during 9/11, which was to have a family plan like, hey, if the communication networks go down, everybody do this thing. Like it was because, I lived in New Jersey and a lot of the phone service stopped working and people couldn't get in touch with folks. But, you kind of said, okay, well, what if this was even a bigger disaster? What if like the whole telecom system went down? We couldn't get in touch with each other. What would our plan be? Well, it'd be to get back to the house. And but then you also need a plan B. It's kind of like disaster recovery planning like we do for IT, but for our personal lives.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds cool. It sounds a great idea, but I just immediately like, okay, cool. Another password that I have to remember. Like, I get it. It's a code word. It makes sense, but the pessimist in me is like, oh, cool. Another password that I have to remember.
The whole thing that I just described sounds like, yeah, cool, but I'm not going to do that. Well, we did a whole episode on the death in the digital estate. Like, it's not important until it's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And it's like,
I'm not
damn.
disputing that it's not important, but now we're really going back to another password, which I get it. It's probably the only thing that actually works in this type of scenario, but I just find it ironic that we've been trying to kill a password and we just keep
Yeah.
finding new ways to keep using them.
The thing is, like, if you said, all right, well, rather than doing that, what we're going to do is like, we'll ask, what is my spouse's grandfather's middle name? And it might have been like Herbert or something, right? That was like most people wouldn't have guessed.
You know your spouse's grandfather's middle name?
I don't. But I'm trying to come up with a scenario, right? A knowledge-based question wouldn't
Yeah.
work because
No, well, yeah,
AI
knowledge
could
bases.
go and, search the internet. Oh,
Yeah.
give me a second. I'm trying to think about, Herbert. I was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
yeah, you pass. But if it's just like a password that you guys
You
came
never
up with,
use
of
it
course,
except for the
I
emergencies.
can't
Yeah.
remember. Like,
Mhm.
okay, we came up with this last night.
Yeah. And if you have a security system and you have to call in, they make you set up a code word that you have to say. And, here's your code word for, if it's a real emergency, here's one if you're under duress, right? Again, these are all passwords that you have to remember, in the heat of the moment to get through and authenticate whatever that communication chain looks like.
My bank still uses now. I think you have to dial in. I have to dial in from my phone that they have on record, but my voice is my password.
Mhm.
And then it's all knowledge based stuff beyond that. Like, oh, what's your email address that we would have on file? Like, anybody who's was able to get to that far is going to pass that one.
Yeah. Well, it's layers. And so you hope that one of those layers trips something up at some point.
Yeah.
Let's see. Another thing that I thought was interesting in this report was passkeys, and that passkeys are still being adopted, but it seems like enterprise passwordless adoption is kind of stalled out somewhere in the mid 40s
Yeah.
percentage wise, which I guess I kind of understand, but I'm sure our friends over at FIDO Alliance are working on ways to make that better. But what are your thoughts on stalled passkeys? Or, deployments, I guess, are just not making as many inroads on the enterprise side, at least, according to this report
Yeah.
from Hypr.
Well, I think you have to use web based applications for passkeys, right? That shouldn't be a problem. I I don't know. Like I kind of feel like in my day-to-day experience within my enterprise, it's mostly passwordless. The problem becomes with passwordless is if it's not true passwordless, like there's still a password there. It's like, oh, you shut down your computer for 3 days in a row, you went on vacation, you get to log in with your password, which you haven't used in 3 months. Good luck. And that's where you have to go through the whole reset process, and it's a nightmare. Um, it, There's a lot of tough things to solve for when it comes to this. I think ultimately, like if you have wide adoption of your IDP and you have passwordless to your IDP, and your IDP handles your login to your device or devices, then you're in good shape. Or if your authenticator can do it. So that's why, frankly, that's why like Microsoft Azure is so popular, or a lot of the other major IDPs supplemented with something like Hypr. And I mean, face it, Hypr is one of the OGs in this space. They're not sponsoring this episode, but I was glad that they wanted to sponsor us because, I really think they've been trying to solve this problem for a long time, or we were just like complaining about passwords. They're actually doing something about it and trying to get rid of them.
How dare they try to fix problems? Can't they just complain like the rest of us?
Look, I think they're actually doing something about it, but I think that we all know that passwords have their problems, and like I sit here and complain about passwords all the time, and I gave a solution to your point that was based on a password. So it is true.
All right, we got a couple minutes left here. What do we think about overall themes to all these reports, other than the fact that, guess what, identity is still at the center of everything?
Um, well, I think the biggest theme is AI speeding things up. I don't think there's a whole lot we can do about that except to recognize that, building building a solution that's based on something ending up on a dashboard and then some human having to act on it is not going to be fast enough. You're going to lose that arms race. I think the other thing is, this is just that much more of a recognition that machine identity is not just a fad. It's not just something that, people are trying to build products on and make a quick buck. This is the future and is probably the biggest threat vector for organizations right now. And then I think the last thing is that, the theft of credentials, whether it's through phishing or social engineering or however, it's almost impossible. It's impossible to get to 100% there. So you almost have to assume you've heard the saying. There's those that know they've been hacked, or those who've been hacked, and those that don't know they've been hacked. It's probably true, and we have talked to people, over time in our day jobs who haven't been hacked, and I don't know. So I don't know. Well, I don't know if that idiom is true when I talk to some of them. But there very well could be some credential that's sitting on their network. The question would be is whether or not that's true now could become true in the future. Would you know about it? You might let somebody go and they say, screw that company, I'm going to get them back. Or somebody might log into something and someone's sitting on that credential and has access to it. Or they got in and they created their own credential. Would you know it? Would you know it? So if you're not sure about that, you should be looking at the solutions that are out there on the market today. And you should be thinking about things like continuous identity so that even if you are breached, the breach can be contained within your walls.
Yeah, the speed is the important part here. Everything is getting faster, which means you've got to get faster too, whatever that looks like in the royal you, I'll call it. The other thing too is third parties. I think a lot of companies do a good job of managing their own employees and to some degree some of their, first line kind of contracting and things like that, that are in their consultants. But look, we're all leveraging third parties in our life now, either personally or professionally in our organizations. And each one of those is now an attack avenue, right? If they get breached or if one of their vendors get breached, it's a very difficult spider web to try and tackle and manage. But start paying attention to more than just your own, workforce. Start looking beyond that and thinking about how you're going to manage those accesses, whether they're human or non-human, doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
All right. I've got a couple lighter note things for you today.
All right.
We did not prep for this, so I'm going to put you on the spot, which you normally put me on the spot in the first, minute or two of every episode. So, Jim, are you a light mode or a dark mode person?
I'm a light mode person, but here's the thing with me is that I've noticed my eyesight really has gotten worse over the last couple of years. Sometimes you'll actually see episodes where I tried to wear glasses, and I've tried what do they call it? Transitional lenses. In other words, bifocal progressives. I've tried regular reading glasses. I saw something on TV, actually on YouTube, about they now have glasses that they have a camera pointing at your eyeball and they can see what you're looking at, and they can turn the LCD crystals within the glass to focus on that item. And it all happens so quickly that it's quicker than the eye can adjust. I think when I get to that, I could become a dark mode person. I used to be a dark mode person, but become a light mode person because my eyes are so bad. And I think you're a dark mode person, right?
100% dark mode all the time, and I'll wear the reading glasses. This is the year of reading glasses for me, so at some point they'll appear. But yeah, still a dark mode. I just can't stand the blast of white that comes off the monitor or whatever you're looking at. It's like, oh, turn that down. Let's go easy on the eyes and try to keep it simple.
My iPhone, I have cranked to maximum brightness at all times, And no matter how many times I reset things to stay there, it keeps like going down. And I get so
You've got the auto
angry.
brightness turned on. That's why.
Jeff, you could probably figure it out, but I'm obviously unable.
All right, I got one more thing for you. If we were to reboot this podcast into a different format, so today it's very conversational. We'll have guests on, kind of talk with, really smart people around identity. We're going to keep the same focus, right? It'll be around identity. But do you think so that if we try to do like a true crime or cooking show or sports talk or something like that, still kind of within the identity themes? What do you think about that idea?
I think I would do a different kind of podcast with you, but I think it would have to be something we both like. Like, I feel like I could do a baseball podcast.
Oh, absolutely.
But not with you because you don't like baseball. You self-proclaimed, and you said you are liking it more, but you'd have to like really start liking it.
I don't like it more. I just watch it more. Doesn't mean I like it. Let's be clear. I'm still not a baseball fan.
And that's fair.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do a football podcast because I don't follow it enough.
Right.
But I think we should do an AI podcast. Like AI at the center could be a thing. And it could be cybersecurity for AI, but it feels like we already do that here.
Yeah.
I think just even like general AI, like the different AI tools would be a cool podcast as well. But there are so many people who do that. That's the point you keep making.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think the other thing I think that could be cool is like more like a Brady Bunch style where you have a bunch of different people. It could be me and you and like 2 or 3 other people, 4 other people, something like that. And we just, hear something in the news and different people talk about it and they key off of each other or have their hot takes on it. So they do that rather than a guest, or once in a while they'll do a guest. They won't bring the guest into the Brady Bunch because they want to say, it's like, hey, we got Elon Musk and we want to pick his brain about, robots or something. They're not just going to stick him in the Brady Bunch. They just give him an hour. Anyway, so that, but a cooking show, like, I don't think I could do a cooking show. Like, and I'm trying to think of like other interests that I have. And, I feel like I spend so much time focused on technology.
I mean, that's definitely my interest. I would be some sort of tech geek, either reviewing things or maybe bags. I think my love of backpacks and my quest for the perfect one bag is still alive and well. So things like that would be interesting. I don't know. I mean, I think we all have different interests, whether it's an identity or technology or elsewhere, and that's fine, right? Not everything has to be for everyone all the time. Find your niche and get out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So start your baseball podcast. I don't have to be on it. That's fine. I can come on as the newbie and be like, I don't know, like, what does this mean? I think the World Baseball Classic is ongoing right now, and I don't know, the U.S. I think they won maybe last night. I don't know.
Yeah, I watched every pitch of it. It was a fascinating game.
Okay, why?
And so these 2 teams were probably like the best 2 teams ever assembled. And they were put on the baseball diamond to duke it out for 9 innings and see who won. And I think if you put these 2 teams on the diamond at the same time to play 100 games, it would be like roughly 50-50 by the end. I mean, that's how they're matched up. I mean, if you look at the Dominican lineup, it was like Juan Soto and Vlad Guerrero and Fernando Tatis and a bunch of other guys that are like household names, Manny Machado. Like, these guys don't need any introduction. And the U.S. side was the same thing. It was like Aaron Judge, Bobby Witt Jr., just a ton of world-class players. I think the U.S. team had better pitching than the Dominicans. Either way, the other thing that makes a good game is when your team wins. When your team loses, it kind of stinks. So no matter how good the game was, you just have like a sour taste in your mouth at the end. The other thing is, like, I'm techie, but I don't always like all the new developments in sports. Like I cannot stand, I'll give you an NFL example. When everybody goes into the end zone and they all pose for a picture, like, hey, we got a pick six. Like, let's all run into the end zone and act like we're posing for our 5th grade class picture. Like, I just think that's so immature, and it rubs the opponent's nose in it. And that's the way the Dominican Republic acts. And hopefully I'm not offending people out there, or probably am. But like after they hit a home run, then they all group up and someone puts their arm up, like, let's take a pretend selfie. And I'm like, ugh, like, I don't like that at all, man. You don't have to rub the other pitcher's nose and like, I just hit a home run off you.
I don't know. That sounds entertaining to me. I kind of like want to show off, and I want to see, within the realms of sportsmanship, of course. But I think it's fine to have fun at things like that. I mean, whether or not you like the celebration is a different aspect of should celebration be allowed. I agree. I think like whenever the defense does a pick six and they all run to the end zone, like, okay, that's lame. But I really like it when they like actually do something that's like coordinated, like they've planned this out, like bowling or something like that. Like, all right, well, that was kind of fun to watch, because the chances of them doing it are, not likely. I mean, even with as many interceptions as get thrown, you probably won't see as very, very many of those on the whole. But I don't care. Have fun. Just don't be a jerk about it. But I want to see teams that don't like each other. Like those are the more entertaining ones to me.
Yeah, look, I mean, like, I'm a New York Yankees fan, which, again, could lose us listeners. But the Boston Red Sox, I just can't stand them. And they don't do that kind of stuff. That's not why I dislike them. I just dislike them because of the rivalry. And, if they win and we lose, then I think that's the one place where it's okay to look at it. Look at the world as like them and us.
Mm-hmm.
Is within sports. Outside of sports, I don't think you should look at the world that way.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, for me, it's the Bears and Packers. And anytime the Bears wear cheese graters on their head and beat the Packers is a great day. And look, that's fun, poking fun and making fun of the situation. And look, the Bears have been bad for a very long time. And so anytime the Bears get to do it back to the Packers, absolutely 100%. I'm on board.
Yeah.
All right, Let's go ahead and wrap it up for this week. We covered a lot of reports. Again, I'll have links in our show notes for all of these. People check out, draw your own conclusions. Maybe post, when I post the availability on this on LinkedIn, what are some of the things that jumped out at you? And thanks to all these vendors. They didn't sponsor this, but they're taking time out of their busy schedules to put these reports out. And in fact, they put it out in the public domain for people to trade their email address, most likely for, is still worth probably taking a look at those reports and using that knowledge to either make a business case or provide justification or just awareness of, hey, these are things that are going on in the world and things to be aware of. So, anybody who wants to put out a report I think more information is a good thing.
Yeah. If you're putting out reports, if we forgot your report or you put out a report in the future, send us the link. We'd love to read it. And if and when we do another report show, we'll, consider including it.
All right. That's it. IDACpodcast.com. Like and subscribe. Use our discount codes. Hope to see people at EIC and Identiverse, kind of the next two big conferences that you and I will be at. And then I'm sure we've got, FIDO Authenticate later this year. And then hopefully we'll be at Gartner again, just like we were last year. So connect with us on LinkedIn and subscribe so you know when these things come out. And with that, we're done. We'll talk with everyone later.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.